why you might want to look at what a podcast can do for your business. And this is going to be about what it's like to be a host, as well as what it's like to be a guest, and the differences between them, the value of each, because they both do have huge benefits. What a podcast can do to connect with the audience, how you can develop a listener profile. And you may have heard of this as an ideal client, an ideal customer avatar, an avatar just in general, not the big blue guys out of the movie, but, but the actual person that you want to be talking to. So we're going to actually go through and start developing a little bit of an ideal customer avatar for you.
This is the Business Owners Smashing It Online podcast for entrepreneurs and business owners looking for cool online tools, apps and strategies to make business easy online. My name is Nick Cree and I'm your host. Each episode features a guest expert demystifying the online universe, sharing inspirational ideas and providing tested real-world strategies to help you get the most of what's available online to grow your business today. Don't be a slave to your business, get your business working for you. Subscribe now and get some great content and ideas for you and your business today.
Excellent. All right. Well, there we go. There's our cool online tools. I can relax now. I've done my bit. So I'm going to hand over to Ryan. I get to sit back and learn as well too. In fact, I was Ryan's podcast guest yesterday. So we recorded a session together on his show, and it was and I have to say that Ryan's show was probably the most professional show I've ever been on. So he's obviously got all the gear and the equipment in behind there. He's had sort of parts of it scripted out, yet we're able to have a really good conversation yet that just did not feel scripted, because I can tell you from my side of things, it definitely was not scripted. But Ryan's got this real knack of being able to put people at ease and to make the whole sort of experience of being on a podcast, very easy and unwooden and very authentic. So if you get the opportunity to be on Ryan's podcast, well worth it, and just a good conversation. Give you a bit of background about him. He's the founder of the Ryan Media Group. He's an entrepreneur and he's got a real passion for focusing on connections between people and content. So even though he was talking about podcasting tonight, he's a photographer, he's a videographer, he's a podcaster. So he really sort of encompasses those visual and auditory visual sort of media. So he's very creative, and he's got a good podcast and a good sort of podcast following as well too. And his mission there is to make a positive impact on the lives of entrepreneurs, and he does that by simplifying the process of audio and video marketing and helping people with the tools and resources and services that they need to make it easy to create their video and podcasts, and also to make it fun as well. So let's put our hands together and welcome along Ryan Fowler.
Thanks, Nick. Appreciate that. And we've actually got another former podcast guest on the show, Jeff. Thank you for being here. That's great to see you. A few other friendly faces as well. So it's fantastic to see you all. And I really hope you're going to get some great stuff out of this. So I do just want to touch on Anchor before I jump into what I'm going to share. Anchor's a great platform. It's a free hosting site, but what some people might not know is that it's actually got a interview option as well. So you can interview people directly through the app on phones, which if you haven't found that option yet and you are using Anchor, certainly give it a try, because you'll probably find some benefit in that for remote podcasting. Okay, so tonight we are talking about podcasting. If Nick hasn't said podcasting enough, you're definitely going to get enough of the word by the time we finish tonight. It's a very fun word to say. Hopefully I won't get too tongue-tied on it, but we'll see how we go. So first off, I'd like to share a little bit with you about how I actually got into podcasting. When I finished high school, I bummed around for about 6 months, and then I thought I'd go and make my millions to retire at the age of 25 by working in a real estate office. And after 18 months of that, I burned out, crashed, and thought I actually need to do something fun with my life. And that's when I started a photography business. A photography business is something you get into for the love of it, not to make $1 million, but you get into photography for the love of it and being creative. My journey there started almost 7 years ago now, and that since evolved through video and really working a lot with business owners and then tourism boards, travel destinations, and all the fun places that you expect to go on amazing holidays. So I was fortunate to do that for a couple of years, but it doesn't turn out to be fulfilling, believe it or not. Something that probably most people wouldn't think. However, that's what got me into podcasting. I took a step back from the travel and tourism side and really focused on what was it that I wanted to do and how could I make an impact to help other people. And that's when I decided to start working with businesses again, using the skills and knowledge and experience that I'd had with digital marketing, working with large agencies and corporations, and taking those skills and putting them into a system and a process that will actually help business owners make content that relates to people to move the needle in their business. And to help accentuate that mission, I decided to start a podcast, because one of the most overwhelming things, and I'm sure many of you on the call could probably relate to this, is digital marketing can be overwhelming, right? There's a few nods here. Yes, good. It can be an overwhelming thing to do. Try and figure out where to start. And I'll just give a little plug to Nick's episode. Make sure you have a listen to that when it comes out. We cover a lot in there, which is great. So that's where podcasting started for me. And the minute that I got behind the microphone, I absolutely fell in love with it. It is such a phenomenal place to be that some of you on here, you've mentioned that you've got podcasts already, and the opportunity for connection between yourself, a guest, the information that you're sharing, and how the audience relate to that is absolutely phenomenal. And I really do love it for that. And I can see how it can help so many businesses really create a connection to their audience. So that's a little bit of my story coming into podcasting and how it became. But first, there's a few of you, obviously you're on here because you want to see the opportunity of podcasting. And I'm sure that there's people watching on the live stream on Facebook at the moment as well, is asking the question of what is a podcast? And I do have a few slides, but I've only limited them to a few just because I wanted to really feel that connection and have you listen in to the words that we're going to be actually speaking tonight. So this is a question that I've heard from a lot of people. What is a podcast? And usually you'll find them on Spotify, Google, Apple Podcasts, that little purple app on your screen that you see pop up. And you can search for people's voices. You can search for specific niches, specific target markets. But my definition of a podcast is that a podcast is the digital form of radio. It allows hosts to reach a global audience in a way that engages with the audience and builds such an incredibly strong relationship with them. I'm going to explain a bit more on this coming up, but how they feel in that relationship is like a relationship that they have with a close friend. It allows you to share information, knowledge, a laugh or two, and it all happens while you're building your profile and you're building your guest's profile. So I'm going to share a bit more on that coming up and on how it actually relates with people. So I'll give you a quick screen share here because this is my podcast. This is the Digital Approach podcast. And the reason that I like the podcast so much is because it aligns with me, my values as a business owner, and that's relationships, having fun in what I do. And that's what helps really bring through so much enthusiasm, the fun, the joy, and everything that comes with running a podcast. And then it allows me the space to have deeper conversations with people. So when you get on a podcast, there's so much that you can do. The screen's probably going to flick because I'll come in and out of the presentation here for a little while as well. But it allows for deeper conversations, more meaningful conversations, and it helps position your business as the go-to place for that kind of information. So when you get positioned as an expert in a certain space and you get the positioning for how you're going to actually bring people into your business, that's where an opportunity and the connection between yourself and the audience really does come in. There is so much value to what a podcast can offer that I'm very excited to be able to share even more of this with you tonight. So there are a few things that I am going to cover tonight, and I'll just share a slide with you very quickly. Sorry, I'm bouncing around a little bit here, I know. And this is what we'll be covering tonight. A few things. I'll do a little bit more explanation on what these are as we go through, but why you might want to look at what a podcast can do for your business. And this is going to be about what it's like to be a host, as well as what it's like to be a guest, and the differences between them, the value of each, because they both do have huge benefits. What a podcast can do to connect with the audience, how you can develop a listener profile. And you may have heard of this as an ideal client, an ideal customer avatar, an avatar just in general, not the big blue guys out of the movie, but but the actual person that you want to be talking to. So we're going to actually go through and start developing a little bit of an ideal customer avatar for you. Some of the pitfalls of podcasting and how you can avoid them. I've experienced this with myself as well as some of my clients. And there are ways to actually avoid these pitfalls where I really believe that you've got the opportunity to make a podcast that's actually going to make a difference to somebody. And then the last thing we'll cover off is maximizing your content. Now, I do actually have a bit of a content planning exercise for us and a podcast interview checklist at the end of the webinar that you'll get a link to if you'd like to download that. But we will go through and do a content planning exercise where I'm actually hoping that this could plan at least the next 3 months worth of content for your business. So we're really going to try and pack some value into a very short space of time. And you're going to see how easy it can actually be to do that. All right. So from here, I want to get into what the value of a podcast audience or podcast is to an audience. Like, why would you want to actually start a podcast? And can I just ask a couple of people? You can flick your mic on. I will ask a few questions as we go through, or you can pop some answers in the chat. What are the reasons that you would be interested in starting a podcast? I know there's a couple of you that are interested that you mentioned at the beginning. So if you just want to unmute yourself or pop a message in the chat, because I'm genuinely curious to see what your reasons for wanting to start a podcast are. Legacy, be introduced to other people's audiences, share information with others. Yep. They're all fantastic answers. And Annie, can I just ask you, gave you a little bit of a shock then, why did you want to start your podcast?
It was an opportunity to reach a different audience. And I think with the work that I do, because I talk to animals, a lot of people think that's very strange and it's not really mainstream yet. And I also talk to animals in spirit, so that's even weirder and stranger. So it was a way of trying to socialize a bit more about what I do and explain how what I do helps animal parents. Mm-hmm. So a lot of my social media I've had to spend doing more educational things and talking about case studies, just so people are more familiar with it and then more confident to try it.
Fantastic. Thank you. Well, that's a great example of why to start a podcast, because it is sharing that information, and podcasts are information sharing platforms. Whether you're wanting to educate people more about the service that you offer, more about a industry or a space that you're in, it can still even be current news. There are current news podcasts that are out there that are industry specific as well. So there's a lot of different opportunities to start a podcast. You just have to choose the reason that resonates with you. So in starting a podcast or being on a podcast, there's two roles that get played: the host and the guest. Now, the host, this is an interesting one. Most people get a little bit confused on this. And thank you, Jacqueline, for that. Interact with others in business and sharing my story. Fantastic. Be an expert in your field. Love that one, Nick. So the other thing about being a host is being the host positions you as the authority. You are the place to go when people need that kind of information. So I'll give you an example. The reason that I started my podcast, The Digital Approach, was because I could see a need in the digital marketing industry to help remove that overwhelm for business owners and entrepreneurs. That also interacts with what I offer as a business owner, being podcast services, productions, tools, that kind of stuff. So being able to be seen as an authority in the space and how that relates to bringing potential new leads in while also coming from a helpful marketing perspective, that really opened up the door to an entirely new audience that's now incredibly engaged, incredibly well connected, and absolutely loves and benefits the value of what is on offer within the podcast. Now, the other role is being a guest. And hands up, how many of you have been a guest or want to be a guest on a podcast? Well, I know Jeff and Nick should definitely put their hands up. Yep, quite a few hands, a few virtual hands as well. Fantastic. So, why do you want to be a guest? Just pop a little comment in the chat, or Barbie, you had a ginormous smile on your face. I could see your face there. What would be the reason that you'd like to be a guest on a podcast?
Oops, sorry. I have been a guest on many podcasts, Ryan, and it's mainly people have contacted me to either talk about feng shui, which is something I do since my architectural days, or why do I think our intuition can be merged with business? So it's been a variety of different people from here locally and around the world that have actually asked me to talk on a podcast. So yeah, my purpose of being here is to learn how to do it myself. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, great. So what you've just shared is a perfect example of why being a guest can position you so well. And there's a few people that have touched on it in the chat as well. Connects you with people, credibility, influence, absolutely. The main thing that being a guest will do is position you as the expert. You are the person that is being trusted to share the information on your particular subject. And you're being trusted by that host who has built a loyal audience of followers. So now that you can start to see how that connection happens, that's where guest appearances, even as other podcasters. So if you have your own podcast, being a guest on another podcast in a similarly related niche is a great way to build your audience. So there's a nice little tidbit for you. And it positions you as the expert, gives you credibility, and gives you the host's tick of approval. Subconsciously, of course, they're not going to say, I certify this person is great at what they do. But because they've brought you on as a guest, you are their expert in that space. So when it connects to the audience, there's a few things that means. And this is whether you're as the host or guest, like I've touched on. Being the host of a podcast especially helps you to build so much trust with the audience. And that does come with an obligation, just like Uncle Ben says from Spider-Man. Anyone read the Spider-Man comics? Yeah, a few people. Yeah. Uncle Ben, with great power comes great responsibility. That's absolutely the case when it comes to being a podcast host. If you disrespect your audience, you will lose your audience. And all that trust, that goodwill, and that reputation that you've built up can be lost incredibly quick. Using Joe Rogan as an example, who's probably the top podcaster in the world, got paid multi-million-dollar figure from Spotify to buy the rights to his podcast. Yes, Uncle Ben does seem to be very wise. Thank you, Tiger. Spotify bought the rights to his podcast, but recently he actually had a little bit of a mishap on air, and he had a huge outrage of his listeners coming to him and saying, we are abandoning your podcast because we do not agree with what you've said. And it goes, and that's what I know that I'm using Uncle Ben here, who's a fictional character, but the quote still stands, is with great power comes great responsibility. And you need to maintain that and look after that, because that is the biggest value of your podcast. And now there are quite a few types of podcasts as well. I know that this question is probably going to come up, and it's one that I do get asked quite a lot, which is, what type of podcast do you even want to do? There's a huge range of them, and this depends on your industry, more specific to who you are, the information you want to share, and how you want to connect with people. So to give you a basic rundown, there's interview shows, which are probably the most common types. You've got solo shows where it's just one person talking. A lot of true crime podcasts, share this history podcasts as well. And then you can go from solo to round table, where you've got discussion points between multiple people, or even co-hosts sharing to connect with the audience and share different perspectives and different points of view. Podcasting's even taken on a lot of the discussion panel types of podcasts that you'd normally see on stage. So discussion panels at conferences and discussing current issues and all that sort of stuff. That can then be translated into podcasts as well. Interview series, a lot of motivational stuff where some people don't even actually go on to speak themselves. They just end up cutting a whole bunch of clips out of YouTube and use that as motivation for people listening. And the list just seems to keep growing. So if there's a few podcasts that you like and you're trying to work out, what type of a podcast is going to be right for me, then look at how you want to relate with your audience and how you feel that they will connect best to your message. We are going to cover a little bit of this in the upcoming section on developing a listener profile. And I just want to touch on this here as well. This is the monetization question. We did bring it up before. Yes, Anchor does offer an opportunity to run ads. A lot of the podcast hosting platforms now do also offer the opportunity to run ads. So you've got things like Anchor, Buzzsprout. That's my personal choice, the one that I use as well. It is a paid service, but it does offer quite a lot of additional features. You've got things like, which is just a fun word to say overall, and and a number of other platforms, but usually Anchor or Buzzsprout or Whooshka are often the places that people will go when looking to set up a podcast. And a lot of these platforms actually do offer the opportunity to monetize them. We can touch on this a little bit later once we get to the end of this. And just in that Q&A section, if you want a little bit more info, I'm happy to help answer a few questions. Just to touch on a couple of points, you've got the opportunity to run ads for small amounts of ad revenue, affiliate marketing, sponsorships, paywalls, what's the other word? Listener contributions, things like Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee. There are a few different opportunities as well to connect with the audience and allow them a way to support your podcast to keep it going. So what actually is the opportunity for a business to podcast? Well, how many of you have got a blog, run a blog, seen a blog, read a blog? Just hands up, virtual hands or real hands. Any blog heads out there? Yes, there's quite a few. Okay, so I'm going to give you a couple of statistics that are probably going to shock you. Podcasting and blogging started at the exact same time. Pretty much. The end of the 1990s, when that digital age started really growing. And you probably remember the dial-up internet sound tone as well. I think it's burned into everyone's brain. But podcasting and blogging started at the same time. It wasn't so easy to podcast as it was to blog. But as blogging has taken off, it's estimated, and I looked this up this morning to check it out and make sure that it was right. It's estimated that there are over 600 million blogs around the world. That's 600 million people with a website that has a blog on it. Now, if you take 600 million times that by 2 posts, 2 average blog posts, that's 1.2 billion. If my math is really bad, then that sucks, but that's 1.2 billion blog posts around the world. Now, for a medium that started at the same time, being podcasting, and the opportunity that it now has to connect with people as it's ramping up its popularity. There are estimated 2 million podcasts around the world, with a total estimation of 48 million episodes. Now, if you look at 48 million by itself, it's a big number, right? But if you look at that in comparison to 1.2 billion with a B, then that makes a very big difference in how big or small that opportunity stands. So with podcasting growing in popularity and a lot less competition in the market, there is far more opportunity for your podcast to reach the market than what a blog can currently do. And now this next stat is a US statistic, but there is estimated 144 million people in the US listening to podcasts. So that 144 million people have a very small selection of what they can actually listen to. That doesn't include people from around the rest of the world. So what I'm going to touch on here is what it can do to help grow your business. But in saying that, the biggest thing, like I mentioned before, is how it can connect to your audience. And that trusted audience is something to value, something to build, and something to grow, because over time, that will give you a consistent base of people to rely on. And there's even people that run full businesses now just from podcasting. And it's really phenomenal how that happens. There's speaking engagements that come out of it. There's books that consistently sell. And how many of you have heard of the 1,000 loyal fans rule, or 100 loyal fans? No? Okay. So it was a blog post that came out, I think, in 2008, one of those 1.2 billion blogs that are out there. And it came out about 2008, but it's, if you have 100 loyal customers that pay you, it's 1,000 loyal customers that pay you $100 a year. That creates a 6-figure business. When you've got a platform and a medium that opens up a marketing strategy, an evergreen marketing strategy, I'll talk on this a little bit more coming up. But if you've got a platform that opens up an evergreen marketing opportunity and you decide to put together a small product, an ebook, a physical book even. I know that I've bought physical books based off podcasts from people that I really enjoy listening to, and I find great value in their content. I've actually got one sitting somewhere over there that you can't see behind the blur. But if every person that listened to a podcast that was one of those 1,000 true loyal fans paid $10 for a book or an ebook, that, again, that doesn't even cost you anything to really run, but that ebook could create a 6-figure business just based off of a podcast, let alone the other platforms and marketing strategies that you implement into your business. So there really is an opportunity to use a podcast to help your business grow, and then the sales and stuff that come off the back of that. And just following on from this, has anyone ever heard of the analogy of using marketing as a table, or thinking of marketing as a table? Yeah, a couple of nods. Yep. So this concept is a table needs 4 legs to stand, right? So does a business's marketing strategy. If you think of your business as the tabletop, if you've got one leg, it's incredibly unstable, especially if that's something like a social media platform, because that can be taken away at any point if they decide that, you're not posting something that's good. So they can do that to remove your social marketing platform channel. If your business relies on that, then it drops off and your marketing stops. Even in the podcast with Nick yesterday, he shares an example of someone that he knew that did actually have that happen to them. And using podcasting as one of your legs of the table. So a lot of people will often have social media. They'll have a podcast, and that could include a YouTube channel as well. There's Google ad revenue, Google ad spend, I should say, and perhaps SEO. So a well-optimized website for organic traffic. So it's not just relied on paid, but it also offers a lot more evergreen opportunities as well. Does everyone know what the actual term evergreen means? Evergreen when it comes to your marketing? Yep, couple. Okay. So I'll just give you a really quick introduction to it. Evergreen is essentially when you create something, content, a piece of information. So I'll use a podcast as an example here, because a podcast is a piece of evergreen content. Essentially, you create it once and it lives online. It lives on the internet and it lives in that space, so that you create it once and it's out there continually marketing for you over time. A non-evergreen marketing solution would probably be something more like a Facebook post or a paid ad, because that's got a limited reach and a limited time frame that it spends online, whereas this other stuff continues, which is, again, another thing for blogging, podcasting, YouTube videos, and all that kind of content. Just going to grab a drink of water. So with that in mind, your podcast, like I've mentioned, builds your like, know, and trust factor. And as we know, that's one of the best things that we can have with our customers to be able to connect with them. Having like, know, and trust, and I think Jeff even mentioned this in a comment the other day on a post I did on LinkedIn, that reviews add into that factor and the branding side of it as well. But having such a deep like, know, and trust factor, this kind of relates to how radio has been perceived by people for many, many years. When radios first came out, they were the medium that people connected to. That's how many people listened to the latest news. They had a connection to the voices that were on there, the people that did the comedy skits, the reading of comic books, and entertainment and stories and connection and all that sort of stuff. And I'm sure that there might be a few people that have felt some of that connection at certain points in time as well. Same thing that we have with our modern day radio when we're in the car. A lot of people will listen because they need company when they're sitting in traffic. They listen to the radio, and I've had my fair share of radio interaction that's actually had a massive effect on me, and also helps to drive what I do now. And the ability to be able to connect with a personality, a host, a guest, and have that connection to build the like, know, and trust factor is incredibly invaluable. So as a podcast host, you are often the voice in people's heads. Now, if you think about how people listen to podcasts, what would be some of the ways? Just get your typing fingers ready to drop a message in the chat or unmute yourself and just drop a couple of mentions. How do you think people actually listen to podcasts currently as they are? In the bath? Hopefully not with a toaster dropping next to you or a hairdryer. Making dinner, yep, that's Nick. While doing housework, I do that. Walking, driving, when they're driving, walking pets, walking in the car, absolutely. And one of the most important points is how they're actually listening to it. Because when they're, like Nick's just said, when they're at the gym, when they're driving, they're walking, most people, or even in the car, they're not playing their podcast to let other people listen to them, right? They're playing their podcast because they're listening to them. So usually it's through headphones. So just like Ron is listening to me right now, Ron, you probably can't hear many things happening in the background, right? Just, yeah, happy, welcome to nod, yeah. So if you can't hear anything outside of your headphones, I'm currently the voice in your head. Now that is an incredibly intimate place to be. Now, I'm really not trying to hit on you here, Ron. I promise you that. But currently I'm the voice in your head because you're listening to me through headphones. Yep. And usually that spot around a person's body, their personal space, is only filled in by very close family, friends, and loved ones. And how much do you trust the people that you let that close to your earlobes, who aren't going to shout in them like your kid brother or something? Yeah, there is very few people that you'd let into that space. So that's the opportunity that we have, and that's why it builds such a deep connection. It's intimate, and like I said before, it needs to be respected. So to keep, you can keep your listeners engaged longer as well using a podcast medium. And I think Nick shared a stat earlier in a post that he did on Facebook. And I've plagiarized your stat there, Nick. But it said that the average length that people will watch a video is 10 minutes. And I can vouch for that. I've been a YouTube creator for years. And, there's YouTube still even pays me to this day, even though I haven't probably posted anything for about 18 months on there. So people will watch for about 10 minutes. And that's still a relatively long length of time. When people listen to a podcast, as soon as you get them with the hook, so the hook is that first little bit right at the beginning that triggers their interest. And there's a moment when people are absolutely hooked into a podcast or a video, that is the moment when they put their phone in their pocket or they put their phone in the center console. So they're going through, they're finding a podcast, they're looking at it, they're trying to figure out which one's good. They'll listen to usually the first 3 minutes of a podcast before they make up their mind to change it. So that first 3 minutes is absolutely critical to keep people listening longer. But once you get them with that hook, that moment of being hooked, like a fish on a rod that just starts swimming away and pulling, that's when you've got them. They put their phone down with a video, they move their hand away from the mouse, and they just lean back in their chair. As soon as they do that, you know that the podcast audience, that particular listener, is going to be listening for the next 45 to 50 minutes. That's the average that people will listen for. Essentially, you're going to get roughly an 85 to 90% listen rate the whole way through your podcast. Now, when you look at a video, for example, especially on YouTube, because there's such a wide range of content and they keep you on the platform for so long, is when you look at YouTube, a good retention rate is, like a really good retention rate is 60 to 65%. When you look at a podcast, a great retention rate is 85 to 90% of the whole way through. So you're getting so much more information delivered to people, especially whether you're either the guest or the host. The host obviously wants to keep people engaged longer because it helps them get their message and build that trust in the audience. So how are we going for time? God, okay, I've been waffling for a while already. Okay, so I do want to get into a few exercises for us. And I'm going to bring up a slide on the screen now just to get you introduced into creating a listener profile. And this is where we want to look at the difference between demographics and psychographics. Whether you might have heard of a client avatar, an ideal customer, just an avatar in general. They're great for marketing purposes for your business. They give you an idea of who you want to target and who your marketing talks to. But this is specific, or a little bit more specific. It's along the same lines as a client avatar. So your ideal listener, and feel free to screenshot this because I'll leave it up for about the next 30 seconds or so. You're welcome to write the questions down. But if you get these kinds of questions answered, then this is going to help you engage with your listener, whether you are a host or a guest. A host, it gives you great ideas for topics. And I really want to save a couple of minutes here for the exercise that I want to do with you. And just grab a screenshot of this because I will pull it down in a second. But these are topics in different areas that are more psychographics. And demographics are kind of who the person is, their age, their income range, where they live, just kind of a few, I'm going to say boring things, but they're still important pieces of information. The ideal listener profile focuses on the psychographics of a customer. This is trying to get inside their head. And I'll cover this in the exercise in just a minute. But why would people want to keep listening to you? What's going to keep them engaged? What problems do people have around your topic or area of expertise? What style of content will they resonate with? This is especially for hosts, the different types of podcasts that are available. So whether it's an interview style or a solo show, that comes into play here. What questions do they ask you? And we're going to build on this in a minute. And then the last one is what frustrates them. Because if you can answer their frustrations, and there's a quote that I absolutely love, and it says, if you can articulate someone else's problem better than they can, you are instantly perceived as the expert. So if you know what frustrates them and can articulate that, answer that in a podcast episode, then you have a fantastic opportunity to really position yourself well as the expert. So I'm going to quickly touch on a couple of things here, and then we'll move into our exercise. First is, how will people listen to your podcast? Podcasting doesn't just have to be audio. At first, yes, if you don't feel comfortable on camera, by all means, just do audio. Because seriously, you can do an audio podcast wearing your pajamas and Ugg boots and just have a conversation with someone, just record the audio. No one's ever going to see what you actually look like. And by the way, that's a really fun way to do it if you're working from home. If you're working from an office, your pajamas or your underwear is probably not the best option to wear. If you can and you feel comfortable, then incorporate video, because this gives you a lot of opportunity and scope to content map what you're actually trying to do and get the most out of the content that you create. I very much believe in the principle, create once and replicate it multiple times. I will show you or explain a little bit of that process and what that looks like that I've done with people. Just so you can get an idea of how it works. But I'm just going to give you a few best practices here as well for being a guest. And these 4 different areas have actually come from my own experience, as well as what I've had with clients who I've managed podcasts for, and applications and guest interviews that have come through. These are some of the things that I absolutely look for. And if someone's got all of them, they're pretty much guaranteed to be a guest on the show, as long as it's in line with the theme of the podcast. So the first one, make sure you got your pens ready here, is listen to the person's show and understand what on earth it's actually about before you contact the host. I have had multiple people, some who I know, some who I don't, reach out, contact me, send me messages on LinkedIn, text messages, Facebook, all that sort of stuff. And they said, I'd love to be a guest on your show. Can I book in? And I've turned around and said, what's your actual business? What could you share? And it's like, oh, I do something completely away from any form of digital marketing. And they just said, oh, hang on, I probably should have looked at you first and figured out what you actually talk about. Because I know for me, my audience relates to the type of content that I feature. And I have an obligation to make sure that my audience gets what's going to be best for them to stay in line and on mission of what my podcast is. The next one is to actually, when you pitch to a podcast host, pitch a topic you can talk about that would add to what the show is actually about. There's people that, they've reached out, they've contacted me and said, I'd love to do an episode on the mindset of pivoting a business. It's like, well, how does that actually apply to what I'm trying to achieve for my audience? Yes, pivoting a business. And I don't know about any of you, but just raise your hand and wave if you can't stand the word pivot anymore. Yeah, pretty much everyone. Yeah, I totally agree with you. But I've had someone reach out and say, I'd love to do an episode about pivoting your mindset to pivot your business. But it's all theory. There's no practicality to what's actually being shared, and it doesn't resonate with the audience. So number 2 is pitch a topic you can talk about and what would add to that person's show. It'll make the host's life much easier, and we love that. Next one is actually send a link to a previous podcast that you've been on to show how well you speak around your topic. So if you can send an example of how you're actually going to sound and come across and how you resonate, your energy, what you bring to the call, what you bring to the podcast, and how it will connect with the host's audience, they will love it. I've actually got 2 upcoming episodes where people applied and sent me podcasts that they'd been on previously. And as soon as I heard them, I'm like, yep, you're the right person for this show. And the last one is just please invest in a decent microphone so that you sound professional. And this does go for both hosts and guests. There's research that actually shows that when people listen to a podcast, they're 70% more likely to trust you if you sound great. I know that might sound a little bit shallow, but it is an audio program. So you have to sound great to come across well. And as your sound comes across, your voice, all that sort of stuff, it helps to build the trust in you. And does anyone want a recommendation for a microphone, a USB microphone if you haven't got one? Okay. The Rode NT USB Mini. Nick or Lorena, if you could grab a link to that, would be awesome, and just drop it in the chat. There's a company in Sydney, George's Cameras, that should probably have one. But there you go. Well done, Annie. I've actually got one sitting in my drawer here. I've since upgraded, but you don't need to go to this level for it. A Rode NT USB Mini, fantastic USB microphone to get you started. Now, how long do we have? Okay, so we have about 6 minutes left for me to talk. So I actually want to run through quickly our content planning exercise. And I'll just share my screen here so that we can see an idea of this. All right. Okay. So I'm going to give you, say, 2.5 minutes. So I'm timing myself as well. When we get to 3 minutes, which is 2.5 minutes away, I want you to find, and I'll just sort of talk in the background here. I want you to find 10 questions that your audience has asked you. Now, this can come from, and I know a lot of you have mentioned this, this can come from your Facebook Lives. I actually had someone come up to me at a networking event Wednesday 2 weeks ago, or a week ago, and say, I'm doing these Facebook Lives, I love the content, but how do I get more from it? I said, have you looked at the questions your audience has actually asked you? And she said, no, I never thought to do that. I answered them on the call, but that was it. You can take every single one of those questions that someone asks you on a Facebook Live, in YouTube video comments, on social media posts, customer or client emails that get sent through, as well as phone calls and text messages, and you create a single piece of content on every one of them. So if you find 10 questions and you create one piece of content on each of those questions each week, you now have 10 weeks of content. Now, you being the business owner and entrepreneur that you are, you would have the mindset of, if someone's asking that question, they're probably thinking this question as well. So if you take those 10 questions, pull out 3 surrounding questions from them, and I can see a lot of people busily writing here, which is great to see. So you take one question, pull 3 questions out of that on surrounding topics, and then you have 30 weeks worth of content. So you've just gone from 10 weeks to 30 weeks in, how long have we gone so far? We've gone for 2 minutes so far, and you've potentially got 30 weeks worth of content ideas right there, ready to go. All you've got to do is create something short around it, which will then prompt more questions to give more answers. And that's how you can create a continual roll of content coming through. And then from that, maybe create a podcast episode with the video turned on. When you create that podcast episode, turn that into social media videos. Take a couple of little quotes out of those. You've now got quote cards. Transcribe it, pull elements out of it, maybe expand on a couple of different pieces, and you've now got 2 to 3 blog posts. You can also make little audiograms. You've got YouTube shorts, TikTok options out of it. So essentially that 30 weeks of content and question answering could last you for, I'd say 9 months potentially. So by the time you're finishing on the end of this, I'm hoping that you could have up to 30 questions ready to go, and that could help sustain you over a long period of time. Which, yeah, this is something that I've implemented in my business a while ago. And by the way, this is water, not gin or vodka or anything. just the FYI there. But this is something that's helped sustain my business over a long period of time, especially if you are doing longer form podcast episodes. That certainly adds a lot of value. Okay, so has everyone got some of that stuff written down? Yeah? Yeah, lots of nodding heads. Awesome. Everyone enjoy that? I know it was very short and quite compact, but just drop in the chat, how many answers have you actually got so far, or how many questions have you got that you could start building content on right now? Five, great. Well done, Gary. 5, well done, Jacqueline. Well done, Annie. 7. All right, so there's a few of you there, which is awesome. So that gives you a very brief explanation into what it can take to plan content quickly. And I think if you keep practicing that exercise, it'll certainly open up a lot of potential opportunities and conversation that you can have with your audience to build their trust. And Annie, I'll use your podcast as an example here, is if you've got questions coming in from people, whether they send it through an email or social media is probably more the place that they'd ask the questions, I would suggest taking those questions and turning them into individual podcast episodes, whether that's you talking or whether you bring in a guest to help answer that, or even a co-host just to fling ideas around with. There are always pretty fun conversations to have as well. So I've got 4 minutes left by the looks of it. Do I just get a nod, Nick? How long? Yeah, 4 minutes. Cool. All right. Nick's just easy breezy. You'll go with the flow. Now, I do want to quickly touch on a couple of the pitfalls of podcasting and how you can actually avoid them. Now, the number one is a thing called podfade. And as soon as you start a podcast as a host, you're going to come across this problem. Podfade is when you start with all the excitement and energy in the world, and then after the first 5 to 10 episodes, usually, you start to feel like, hang on, this isn't getting me the result that I want because it didn't happen instantly. And then your excited weekly schedule of new podcast releases becomes fortnightly. And then it becomes monthly. And then it becomes every now and then when you can actually figure out what to talk about and take the time to do it. Now, this content exercise that we just did, I'm hoping is going to help you avoid falling into podfade. And yes, it is something that does happen. Out of those 2 million podcasts, I'm sure probably 1 million of them are probably sitting idle at the moment because podfade fully kicked in and fully embraced. But if you've got a proper strategy and you actually allocate and dedicate the time to make it happen, then there is an opportunity to make a podcast a successful option for your business and your marketing strategy. And the second one is time wasting elements. So as you've planned your content, you want to go and film it and do all that sort of stuff, try and make a workflow for how you actually do things. Systemize is something that we've probably all been told. I'm sure Nick's probably spoken about this a few times on the show, is systemization, but creating a proper workflow, how everything moves through, and you've got a system and a process to make that happen, then that will help to streamline things and save you time, whether that ends up being outsourcing for certain elements, or just making a proper workflow so that you can get through things and dedicate the time to do it the way that you like it done. Those are 2 quickest things that I can share on the side of podfade and planning for your podcast. And I know that we are just wrapping up at the end here. So I would like to also share a resource if I can, and I can drop a link in the chat to that as well, which is the podcast interview checklist. You're welcome to go and download it. It's a useful guide to just go in and help your content and helping you interview people sooner and better without having to try and remember every single step. So essentially, it is just a checklist of things that I run through in every single podcast. This is actually the first time it's gone out to anybody, so you guys are going to be the first ones to get it. And it's simple. It's just a checklist you can print out, stick on the wall, and it reminds you of all of the steps that you need to take that many of us in podcasting will always forget. And it's a good reminder for you and a reminder of what you need to share with your guest. So we are at our time. I do hope that you've enjoyed this conversation. I know there's a lot of information in there. So I hope you've all got a lot of great value from it. There's been a lot of heads down and writing, and I'm sure furious pens rolling around on paper. So thank you very much for listening to me, and hope you enjoyed it.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, thanks very much, Ryan. Just curious as well, too, how many people here, having heard that, are now going to consider either being a guest on a podcast or create their own one? Just give us a show of hands. Perfect. And there are some great people around here that have podcasts and shows. Obviously, Ryan's one of them, and I would suggest that you have a listen to a show before you ask to be a guest. There's also Aldwin here. She's got a show as well too. Anyone else currently have a show that they run at the moment, a podcast at the moment they run? And Annie as well too. Perfect. Excellent. So with all this, just going to ask Ryan, if anyone wants any help with regards to putting a podcast together, is that something you can help with?
It certainly is. Yeah. Podcast setup, how to get it right, developing a listener profile, and being able to actually create a synopsis for your show. So it's got a mission and a message behind it, and then get it up and running, ready to go live.
Superb. Best way to get in touch with you? Email
at ryan@orionmedia.group.
Excellent. Well, if you drop that into chat as well too.
Sure.
And what some of you may not know is Ryan actually helps to publish podcasts as well. So if you've got overwhelmed by the tech and all the setup and that sort of thing there, then he can take care of all that sort of stuff as well too. So there are no excuses for not podcasting. So the only thing you need to do is to get those questions down and take action. All right, any questions that we've got for the next couple of minutes? Probably squeeze in some if anyone that's got any questions or looking for any clarification at all. If you have, just drop it into chat, unmute yourself.
Yeah, Nick, hi, it's David here.
G'day, David, how are you going?
Good, thanks, not too bad. Ryan, just had a quick question. You mentioned 45 minutes is about the standard time that people stay on a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Does that apply when you start, like when you're starting off, when you're doing your first few, or is it more to be concise, get to the point?
That's an average.
That's an average.
Yeah. So that's based on a lot of different podcast data. I actually didn't mention this, but thanks for bringing this up, David, is your podcast length should be based on how long you feel people are going to actually listen for, and how much information you want to share with people in a certain time frame. So can I just ask what your business is?
It's for a future business, and it's around coaching.
Okay. So coaching, if you were to have a podcast on that, and can I ask what industry?
For school kids, basically.
School kids. Okay, great.
Yeah.
So let's just say, I'm just going to completely throw this out as a off the cuff thing, but if you have your podcast for coaching of school things, say it's targeted to the parents, what's kind of a common length of commute, for example, from a parent's home to school? Could be 20 minutes, maybe?
Yeah, 20, 30 minutes, maybe.
20, 30 minutes. Okay. Let's just say 20 minutes and they're stuck in the school traffic for 10 minutes a day.
Okay.
If they had an option to listen to a podcast for 30 minutes, that fills that time gap for them. And that's how long they'll listen for. My podcasts go for between 35 to 45 minutes, but because Nick likes to talk, it went much longer. But that's because I know that most of my audience is listening to it on longer drives or while they're exercising, which usually takes up to an hour, most oftentimes between 45 minutes to an hour. So that's where they'll actually be listening for the whole time, and it'll fill that space for them so they're not sort of hunting for content.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
Welcome.
Awesome. Excellent. All right. Well, look, anyone wants to get in touch with Ryan and find out a wee bit more about podcasting, he'll drop his email address in there. And of course, you can go to his website as well too, which is orionmedia.group. All right. So now we do have a door prize for tonight too, don't we, Ryan? Do you want to tell us about that?
We do, yes. So coming up, we have an option of 2 fantastic prizes. I always love doing those fun voices, but I can do the voicemail really well as well. So we do have 2 choices. We have one as a video marketing strategy session where we can go through and develop your content plan a lot more and in more depth, as well as a pretty detailed customer avatar. Or I can help take on one of your podcast episodes, get it produced, sounding great and ready to upload for you to take that time off your hands.
Awesome. So our winner tonight has a choice of one or the other, so you can get to choose. All right. So we, as ever, we have a special way of drawing it, and it's not with the whiteboard. So let's try that again. We have our wheel of names. So everybody's name that is in that wheel of names that are here, we'll draw it out. And remember, you have to be here to win. So it's either getting your podcast episode all done and published, or at the start of it, getting your strategy, audience, and topic all sorted out. All right, so let's spin the wheel and draw the name out of the hat, well, the wheel. And lucky winner is Steve Pfister. Well, how appropriate is that? Because Steve just mentioned to me today that he's about to dust off his podcast and get it running again. So congratulations, Steve. You are the lucky winner tonight.
Well done, Steve. It's fantastic.
So what we'll do is we'll connect you up, and then Ryan and you, Steve, can touch base and work out sort of what to do, what you want to do. Awesome, excellent. Well, let's give Ryan a big round of applause for what he's shared with us tonight. Been an awesome session having you on. I, for one, really know the power of podcasts. My goal this year is to get onto at least one podcast every month. So, if you're not publishing a podcast, then there's an opportunity to, be a guest on someone else's. That way you don't have to do all of the work of thinking of topics and things like that. Potentially, you can do it with just one topic. So whether you're a guest or whether it's something you want to do, I look forward to listening to your episodes. And remember, if you are on a podcast or you're starting one, remember to share it in the Business Owners Smashing It Online Facebook group. And because there's a whole lot of people there that would be interested to hear it, me being one to start with. All right, well, that's all we've got time for tonight. If you want to watch this again, it will be up on YouTube tomorrow afternoon. So feel free to subscribe to the Smash Go YouTube channel. And if you hit the bell after you subscribe, then you'll get an email notification to let you know when it's up, so you don't have to keep going back and checking to see whether it's there. And remember, obviously the Facebook group, Business Owners Smashing It Online Facebook group, that's where we make all the announcements about this, and you meet some pretty cool people in there as well too. So that's our session for this week. Look forward to seeing you all back again next week. So all go and have a sensational week.
Thank you for tuning in and listening to the Business Owners Smashing It Online podcast. You can also find me on social media and online. Just search for Business Owners Smashing It Online and Nick Cree, spelled Nickcree, all one word. If you like this and want to hear more, subscribe now. Until next time, don't be a slave to your business. Get your business working for you.